Hi, this is Chef Rick, and we're doing Temple Parks and Recreation virtual cooking classes, and I'm coming from my kitchen to yours. Today, we're going to do a version of King Ranch casserole for two. So real quick and simple and easy. I'm all about easy and not a lot of pans or dishes. Our ingredients, we've got our flour, our seasonings, and cheese and chicken, and just want to bring up the chicken. What we did with the chicken, we had a rotisserie chicken that we had used from a previous show, and we're using the rest of that today in this dish. So that's a way to use it up so you don't have all those leftovers. So to get going real quick, we've already got our oven preheated because we're going to have to put this in the oven to bake it. We're going to turn our pan on, and we've got some unsalted butter in here. We're going to let that melt, and we're going to make something called a roux. And a roux is nothing more than basically equal parts of fat and flour. If you're gluten-free, you can use flour substitutes that don't have the gluten in it. Today we're using gluten, or regular flour for everybody, which does have gluten. But we're letting that melt and get that stirred up, and then while that's melting down, we're going to get ready. And we're going to cut our onion up. We peeled our onion, and we're going to dice that up. And I'm just checking. Yeah. Get it cut up and minced up. So I like it relatively fine, and I like a lot of onion. It says a small onion, so you just slice it thin, and then turn it a quarter, slice down, and you got a nice mince. While our butter's melting there. Okay. Let our butter get melted, and then we're going to add our onions. Pretty much everything is going to go in here. We're going to make this a one-pot meal instead of having a lot of bowls. We've got all our stuff prepped. The butter's come up. We're going to add onions. Let those saute a little bit. And again, we're using our bench scraper. Makes it real easy to get everything off the bench. Okay, so that's cooking away, and we got our fire about medium high on this one. Let that cook for a little bit. Sweat some of that juice out, 2 or 3 minutes till this cooks down, and then we've got some seasonings that we'll be adding, and we'll add our flour. And flour, we're going to again make a roux. So I'm going to turn that up just a little bit. I want some of that moisture to cook off. The other thing that we'll be doing when you put spices in something, especially if you have some fat of some kind, it's always nice to what I call like bloom them, because oil is what carries the flavor. So when you just put a spice in some water, you don't really get the full flavor of it. It's always best to put it in with some oil, or if you're doing Indian style cooking, they will toast their spices, and that really brings the flavor out. It's like, if you've ever seen in Mexican cooking, they toast the chilies. That oil that's in the product helps bring the flavor out of that item, so you can really get it. Otherwise, you don't get the full effect of the flavor of that particular spice or seasoning. So this is going to really be pretty simple and pretty straightforward. We've got a baking dish over here prepared, and instead of doing this like the recipe we're calling for two, I'm going to do it in one casserole dish. You can do it however you want to. The other thing you can do with this dish, prepare it, wrap it up, you can freeze it. Then when you get ready to use it, take it out of the freezer the day ahead, let it thaw out, just pop it in the oven. Keep it covered with some aluminum foil while you're baking it, and the last 10 or 15 minutes, when you are ready, take the top off and let the topping brown a little bit. But that foil will keep it from burning. But this is a real good dish to, at least for me, to keep it in the freezer. Makes a fast entree for you. Okay. So our onions are starting to turn translucent. We're going to go ahead and add our flour. Stir that in. Also going to go ahead and add our seasonings so we can bloom those. Okay. We're just sort of going to toast that a little bit. But we're going to put everything in here and make our casserole from here. And I always like, the one thing with onions and that if you cook them just a little bit more, they get a little sweeter. It gets rid of that raw flavor, but you know, a lot of people like that raw flavor in their dish. It's all to your own personal preference. You might be able to hear a little bit on the bottom. I'm scraping off where that flour is starting to toast on the bottom. Okay. Okay, this is cooking away. That's toasting a little bit there. Now we're going to start adding some more things to that, building on the different layers of flavor. We're going to add our Rotel tomatoes. And you can add however you want. If you want to add mild, you want to add spicy. I'm sort of adding the original. And because I'm doing that, I'm not going to dice up a jalapeno and put in it. But if you want that, that's what you would dice up at this time, put that in there. Now we're going to make this a little creamy. I've got some heavy cream here we're going to pour in. Just a little bit. And I've got some chicken broth. We're going to add that. I'm not going to add all of it at this point because I want a nice sauce. I need to stir this around and let this come up to a simmer. While I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I'm scraping the bottom of the pan and mixing everything in there. Because if you don't scrape it off the bottom, you're going to run the risk of it scorching. And once it does that, you got to start all over. But you can tell as you're stirring, it comes up. And then slowly it'll start to thicken up a little bit. While I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and add some salt and pepper. And being from where I was, I always wondered if you're using chilies, they're a kind of pepper, but it's different. The rule of thumb is, a chef taught me many years ago, for flavor you use black pepper. For a little bite you use white. For heat you use red. So white for bite, black for flavor, and red for heat. So a little fresh ground black pepper and just a little more salt there. And it's starting to simmer up around the side a little bit. We're going to go ahead and, I can tell that it's going to be, so we're going to add the rest of our broth to it and let that come up to a simmer. And once that's come up to a simmer, we're going to go ahead and start to assemble our casserole. So we've got some corn tortillas, we've got a casserole. We're going to want to spray that so it doesn't stick. Okay. And then we've got our chicken over here that's going to go in, some cheese, a little optional cilantro if you care for it. You don't have to. It'll just take a few minutes. We've already got our oven preheated to 350 degrees. And then when we get ready to put the casserole in the oven, we'll go ahead and put it on a baking tray. So just in case for some reason it would spill, it's a little precaution for you. But as this sauce starts to get a little thickened, we'll let it come up to a boil, and then we'll turn it off. We'll add our chicken, and then we'll start layering in. I kind of think of this, when I first did this, it was sort of like Mexican lasagna, or the enchilada, but instead of using noodles, we're using tortillas. And if you wanted to use flour tortillas, you could do that. You don't have to use corn, but that's I think a little more traditional. But everybody has their own way and how they like it. Some like more of a white sauce, some like more of a red sauce. But it all comes out well. See, there's just a little bit of cream left there. We're going to scrape that in. There. That gives it just a little bit of richness. And then we've got some shredded Colby Jack cheese that we'll be putting in, layering that in. Just got to come up to a simmer. That takes just a little bit. So, not too long. We've got our sauce, and it's come up to a simmer, and it's thickened up nicely. So we're going to start putting that together. Let me do that. And what I like, it's just my preference, but what I like to do after I turn the burner off here, I've got my casserole dish. And I don't know, for some reason, I like to take just a little bit and put it in the bottom before I add the chicken. Okay, and I've taken that rotisserie chicken that we had from a previous lesson. So we had a half a chicken left over, and I've shredded that. I'm going to add this in. Okay, and give that a stir up. And that's kind of the way it looks. Now we're going to start off. We've got our dish, and you can either tear the tortillas or you can cut them, but I'm just going to put some in the corners to sort of fill the corners in a little bit. And I'll stick one in the center, and then a little cheese. Never can have enough cheese for me. And then we're going to put a nice layer of this chicken and sauce in here. And you have to remember when you're doing this also, the sauce is going to get absorbed into the tortillas a little bit. So if you think it's too thin, don't worry about it. Okay. Another layer. In there. And then a little more cheese. Okay. Some more tortillas. Okay. And then our final layer. Okay. There you go. And then we're going to finish off with some cheese. Now, if you were going to freeze this, I'd do stop right here and then go ahead and cover it up and secure it for the freezer. But we're not going to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and put my cheese on. And if you, like I said, if you're going to stop here, you just pick up at this point with some cheese, pop it in the oven. You can leave the foil on for a little while so your cheese doesn't get too brown. And I've got a pan over here. So that's our casserole. We're going to stick it on our baking sheet. We've got a 350-degree oven. We're going to slide this in the oven. And this is going to bake for 30, 35 minutes. And then we'll take it out. And we'll have some King Ranch chicken for two. Okay, we're all ready here to take this casserole out of the oven. We've had it baking for about 30 minutes. And it's nice and bubbly on the top. Cheese is melted, a little bit crispy. We're going to plate this up. Got a little plate here and a spoon. So you can, the one thing you probably will want to do, but I can't wait, is let it set a little bit so it firms up a little bit, because it will be a little more runny now. But I'm ready. I am ready. Yeah, that's it. That is it. All the chicken and. But if you let it set for a little bit, it will firm up a little bit, easier to dish up, but I'm ready to eat. A little Mexican crema on the top, a little cilantro just as a garnish, and that's it. Chicken enchilada casserole.